Rose. Welcome to the Thought Room.
Why, thank you, Kyle. It's an honor to be here on the Thought Room.
Yeah. It's my honor.
It's been a long time coming.
Yeah.
Me being the guest.
Yeah.
I've only done one solo episode, and it was the first ever episode of the Thought Room.
Wow.
And now we're up into the 70s.
Okay.
So I'm overdue.
Long overdue. Yeah.
But to be transparent, I feel a lot of resistance to being the guest.
On your own podcast.
Yes.
What's that resistance to?
Well, I believe a part of my joy in hosting this show is getting to be able to be a hype man, hype woman, hype person for the person I'm interviewing and ask questions that bring out their shine, and quite comfortable just in that role, in the role of amplifying and shining the light on others. So it's a little vulnerable and awkward to have that light shone on me.
Exciting.
How exciting. This is growth, right? This is growth in real time when I don't want to do something necessarily. And then I'm like, cool. There's resistance there. Like, what an opportunity to lean in and learn about myself. And I think part of the trepidation of sharing more of my story and more of what's been going on this year is surely the amount that's happened in such a short period of time that it's almost overwhelming.
Right.
It seems like a fairy tale, what's happened. So, and then again, it doesn't feel like a fluke because the many years of difficult training that life provided me with to get here, to learn the things that I have integrated into my life to be able to create new structures and new pathways because of those tools that were really hard won. You know, it all really feels intentional. But yeah, that's how I feel coming into this.
Feels like a fairy tale.
Yeah, like I was sharing with you today and my brother Caleb and his girlfriend Mel that when I'm experiencing a peak moment, if I can awaken myself within that moment and take it all in with as many senses as possible and the most widened awareness that I know how to access, I love to do that. I love to just take in the scene. And this year I've had so many of those moments that I've been cataloging where I've said on the inner, I'm inside of a peak moment. I'm inside of a peak moment.
Right.
Yeah. So there's been a challenge in, as silly as it sounds, opening up to so much goodness coming in because, you know, this show and the dream of it, none of this would have existed if I hadn't gone through what I went through earlier in life, which just became the normal.
Right.
Just like a regular amount of shit hitting the fan all the time.
Right.
Deaths in the family and me going through a lot of chronic illness, living in like really extreme conditions and poverty conditions, trying to create something out of my life. I've been experiencing this interesting feeling too of, it's been my experience that when we receive a thing that we've been longing for so long, there can almost be a grief when you receive it, because there's a confrontation with all of the moments in the past where you wanted it but did not receive it from whomever or whatever outside source you were hoping would provide that to you. And when I have dropped into the flow of life and really felt in alignment, it breaks my heart in like the most beautiful way. And I get in touch with past versions of myself who was struggling and just doing the best that she could. And I feel a lot of compassion for myself. Yeah.
There's like a gratitude for finally getting it, and an anger for all the times you didn't.
Yeah. It's a very multidimensional feeling.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking inside, oh, why did I have to go through that? And oh my gosh, this is so perfect. I wouldn't be able to access the gratitude for what I'm experiencing to the degree that I'm experiencing it without having the contrast of those intensely difficult times.
Yeah.
And that's frustrating. It's like, but did I really need to go through all that? And you look back and you kind of go, yeah, I did. And that requires a certain level of surrender of the old stories, the ones that keep us in pain, keep me in pain, because if I'm not willing to surrender to the notion of the perfection of those things as training for my life, then I block myself off from the gratitude and the perfection of the goodness that wants to come my way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So lots of contrast.
Lots of contrast.
Lots of goodness.
Mm-hmm. That's been how the year has gone. Mm-hmm. Definitely started in a not so comfortable place.
What was that place? What did that feel like?
Well, I was in a relationship, a romantic relationship with a beloved partner, and had all the dreams of building a life together. And for the previous few months had really found myself awake and observing a cycle between us, between he and I, that I guess frightened me, because I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was just like the way we're relating with each other is not my highest standard of how I want to treat someone or be treated. And okay, so let's figure that out. We can do that. And then diving into all that with him and really doing the work together in the best ways that we knew how, and hiring all the experts that accessing all the resources and the devastation of feeling like I still couldn't find him, and maybe he couldn't find me on the level that I was hoping to meet each other, and drowning in that decision of it's not like we're not trying. I've never seen two people try so hard.
Mm-hmm.
And the energy just wasn't moving in a direction that I felt was productive.
Right.
So bringing that forward to him was really, really difficult. I was already heartbroken with the idea of it. And then the fear of how that would be received was a whole nother level. And I believe that he saw things differently than me and probably would have liked if I was willing to continue to try and work on things. And the impulse in me was just so strong. And I was very confused. I couldn't figure out why we couldn't figure it out. And I started to get really hard on myself.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, oh my gosh, if I can't figure this out with all the tools that I have and all the books on nonviolent communication and all this, if I can't figure this out, then am I even who I really say I am? You know, like am I real?
Right.
Am I in integrity? So like I wasn't going to give up. Giving up's not who I am. So I was staying in it, and that's a confusing thing. We talked about this question the other day, what would love do? You know, and sometimes it's not clear.
Mm.
You know, sometimes, at least in my case, we make the decision, and it's really nice when it pans out that we immediately are like, I made the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes we make the decision and then we doubt it.
Yeah.
And we question ourselves. And that's what it was like for me in the beginning. Was knew I was really upsetting someone that I loved, and I thought, gosh, I should be really sure before I do this. But what I've learned about life and love, it is true what they say, you know, if you love someone, let them go, and if it's meant to be, they'll return back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because the energy of love to me is not grasping.
Yeah.
And I could feel us grasping. I wasn't sure for what, but I knew that if there was going to be a chance at cleanliness and the energy, there needed to be a time of reset. And I've been around also long enough to know that things often pan out in a way that I don't expect. So when I start a relationship, when I end a relationship, I don't even believe they really end. I think we're always connected in some way.
Mm-hmm.
But you never know. I mean, I've had like the craziest things happen with people coming back out of the woodworks after not hearing from them for a very long time in very surprising and synchronistic ways, yourself included, you know? And so I've learned to just trust my intuition without being impulsive, which is a nuanced thing because sometimes a feeling will come on and it's like, is this an intuition or is this an emotional reaction to what's going on? So I spent several months tracking that. And by tracking that, I mean watching it with awareness and taking mental note and tally. And I do that a lot with my behaviors, with my languaging and choices. I'll track it. It doesn't mean I necessarily change it in the moment when it's happening. Even if I see myself doing a behavior that I maybe don't love so much, I try not to go into immediate judgment of it because that's not productive and that actually just perpetuates whatever shame cycle or emotional addiction I have with that thing and the guilt or shame around it. I try to just be a little bit detached and track it and go, okay, and we did that and we did this. And is that a behavior we like to keep doing? Yes, no, okay. And I just keep watching it. So I've been tracking the relationship and journaling a lot, just really honestly with myself and asking if there were things I could be doing to be a better partner. And I look back and I know that I tried. And I think that's what helps me to feel okay with the decision that I made, even though it didn't pan out in the way that I had hoped, especially in the aftermath. um, but again, here we are now, and I can't even fool myself by saying it wasn't the right decision. And it still hurts. And I think both can be true.
Uh, absolutely. At what point did you start realizing or feeling more in touch with the trust that you made the right decision?
Mhm. It's a really good question. Well, I think I was validated by an initial feeling of relief when I found myself alone in my own space. And although there was a great deal of pain to be sitting with at the same time, I also felt like I had space to breathe and think. I had been in a pretty high state of free floating anxiety, I believe, for many months, maybe even close to a year.
Mhm.
And so I could actually feel myself taking deep breaths uh, um, for the first time in a while. And that's not uncommon, I think, with people who are, relationships are mirrors, obviously. And some relationships, I believe, just are very karmic in that they're meant to be dissonant. They're meant to be really difficult. They're designed that way to provide the contrast. And yeah, so I guess leaning into that as much as possible. Um, you asked when.
At what point did you start feeling in touch with the trust you made the right decision?
Mm, mhm. Geez, not for a while. Not for a while. I think when I started to track other details in my life, such as my body, such as the speed at which my thoughts were crossing the threshold of my mind,
Mm.
such as how much laughter was a part of my days now versus before. How was my creativity flowing? And when I started to see that all of those things were improving, I thought, okay, well, even if I don't understand this right now, I feel like, I feel like we're all buoys, that have just like all these rusty anchors on them, and we're being pulled below the surface. And our surrender is when we know which direction we're being called to flow in, and we just cut the anchor. And throughout life, I think we're just cutting anchors. We're just releasing stories and pain. And as we do that, we float more up to the surface, to our true essence, to what we really are, to the divine, to the universe, to God, whatever you want to call it. That happens for me every time I surrender, even if it's not the way my personality ego would have liked the situation to go. And because I trust myself, I trust my ability to navigate uncomfortable situations. So it's a lot easier to take risks and jump into the unknown when you can look back, when I can look back and canvas my life and say, remember when you did that? Remember how you've survived 100% of your hardest days? Here we are. Hasn't taken my life yet, so that's a really good track record.
Yeah. So there wasn't so much as a clear moment in which you knew. It was just a transitionary phase. And at some point, you started being able to look back and feel that in retrospect.
Yeah. And it has happened in layers.
Right.
The healing for this breakup has happened in layers. And it was very gradual, just a little more laughter at a time, a little more of my hobbies coming back out, ukulele, dancing around the kitchen, getting out, breaking out into new circles of people I hadn't connected with in a while. And slowly I was like, okay, I can do this. I'm starting to feel myself again. I'm starting to remember what I like and who I am outside of, any relationship. So, and then what made this really possible was the social support that I had, because I must have called you and Dani every single day this year. And you two were my pillars. She was my feminine pillar, you were my masculine pillar. And I was, perhaps for the first time in my life, having all of my social needs met. I felt supported. I felt empathized with, and nothing that I brought up was too much or too ugly. It was all held. And that made a huge difference, because I have brought myself through many a process before without that support. And let me tell you, it's incredibly challenging.
Yeah.
And it's the loneliness of going through those things adds a whole nother layer. And I believe that's why depression is so pervasive, because we have a lot of people going through immense challenge, disconnected and alone, feeling like the only ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to orient.
Mm-hmm.
It's like trying to get out of a storm.
Right.
Once you're out, you can see clearly where you
Exactly.
are, where you're going. But inside, it's very difficult to see what's
Right.
going on.
Right. And, you and I have been, we started forming a friendship like how many years ago?
4, 5,
More. It had to be.
5 years.
Yeah. And you witnessed me through a lot of my dark times in the storm. And we've talked a little bit about what that was like for you to witness. Would you share about that?
Yeah. It was very difficult. And there was this sense of helplessness
Mhm.
watching something go down, but not feeling like it's your place to do anything about. And so all you can do is witness.
Mhm. Yeah. I've heard that a similar experience shared when I speak with people who are loving somebody who is going through depression.
Yeah.
This helplessness of wanting to do something to be able to help them
Yeah.
and feeling like you're grasping at straws
Hmm.
and you're watching somebody that you love spiral, and if they could just do this one thing, everything would be okay. And
Yeah.
what do you do with that? Because how can we interfere in somebody else's journey? At what point do we? And w- what if it gets really scary? How did you deal with all that?
With a lot of trust in the universe, in the perfection of what is, and learning to be able to go back to that question of what would love do. It's a very useful question. It's a very simple one, but it's very difficult to remember to ask yourself that.
What about people who would argue, well, what would love do in a situation where someone's hurting? They would keep trying and keep trying and keep trying and keep trying and not I mean, wouldn't holding back be meaning giving up on someone?
That would be assuming that it's wrong for someone to hurt.
So you're saying that overreaching sort of energy of trying to fix someone is on some level, on some dimension, on some psychological level, actually a communication to the other person that where they are is not acceptable.
Exactly.
And from speaking from personal experience, I can say that that energy is absolutely felt
Yeah.
by people, and it creates a desire to shut down further and feel more lonely and more isolated.
Creates even more pressure.
Because then I've felt, oh my gosh, I can't share this with this person. That's one fewer person I have trust in now.
Yeah.
And slowly everything's dwindled like burnt matches, and you find yourself the last match in the box.
Yeah.
It's a very scary feeling.
Yeah. And we think that we're trying to change things for their sake, but really we're projecting our own lack of acceptance of
Hmm.
what isn't going right for ourselves.
Because why? Because we're afraid that we'll lose the person or that they won't be okay and we need them to be okay, or
Exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah. Because we think we have to be okay. And I think the more that we accept what is for ourselves, we start to be able to see the beauty in what's going on for others,
Mhm.
no longer feeling this need to change it, and starting to learn that what love would do
Mhm.
is just witness,
Mm-hmm.
not interfere.
Witness.
Yeah. It doesn't need to change things.
Do you think the idea of witnessing, simply witnessing another in their emotional experience, do you think that's underrated?
I think witnessing is a very powerful tool for transmuting things.
What does that mean when you say, because you've witnessed me many a time, but let's say that somebody doesn't know what we're talking about when we say witness, to witness another. What does that actually mean to you?
Mm-hmm. Well, in a practical sense, an example could be if someone feels this enough safety to actually share about their experience with you. There can be this internal urge to feel like you need to know what the right thing to say to help them fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes this waiting to speak phenomenon, waiting to say something.
Mm-hmm. To make sure they get the value out of coming to you.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. We can feel like we want to have been able to contribute in a way that actually changes things or makes things better. So witnessing would be just learning to actually catch that and observe that and not wait to speak, but to just continue to listen. And oftentimes, if you wait just a little bit longer when someone's sharing, rather than saying the perfect thing to make it better, they start being able to actually go into it more deeply and get into deeper layers and sort through things on their own, talk through things on their own. Becomes more a matter of holding space and just watching someone talk themselves through something rather than offering the right advice.
Yeah. There's this potentially flawed assumption that what is said is what's of value.
Yes.
Versus how we presence
Exactly.
with another. And it reminds me of sharing circles. I always, at every event I go to, there's a sharing circle. And oftentimes it appears like everybody is just rehearsing in their head the cool thing that they're going to say when it's their turn to sound the most impressive. And not really listening to or participating in the energy of the circle at all because everybody's so concerned with themselves.
Exactly.
And my practice has been when it's like I try to deeply listen, connect on an emotional level with what each person is saying. And then when it's my turn, I take the time that I need. Sometimes I close my eyes and take a deep breath. I'm allowed to collect myself and center myself on my heart and actually speak from an organic place. I don't know what I'm about to say because I'm being inspired by the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking from the heart.
Yeah. Speaking from the heart.
Yeah. This is what I would call, or what I understand the difference to be between being in the heart rather than in the mind.
Right. I've learned this, or I find this, but I experienced it early on in podcasting, which was sometimes I have people on the show, and sometimes I know a little bit or not very much about what they're about to talk about, and sometimes I know a great deal about it. So what I would experience in my mind, if there was a topic that I knew a great deal about, the other person was talking and I'd have like a smart fact pop up in my head, like, oh, this would be perfect.
Right.
And on a lot of podcasts, I noticed before I created the thought room, what I really didn't love was people cutting each other off and kind of one-upping each other, who's the smartest, like broing out over who can share more smart facts. It's like a total ego battle,
The
right?
waiting to speak rather than waiting just a little bit longer.
So I want to co-create, and I learned that with podcasting, I would have these questions or these really cool things pop up. And the talk that I had with myself was, if you're meant to say it, there will be an opening, and I would release it. And sometimes the guest might see it in my eyes, or they would leave a pause, and then it's time. It's time for that thing to be shared. And if they didn't, if they continued on, if they went into a completely different topic, I just left it because I trusted that when it was my turn to play tag, I would undoubtedly know it.
Yeah.
And that's true, I think, in holding space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm. So those are a couple of things this year that I've been integrating.
Yeah.
Trying to live by.
So the way I went about watching your process go down over the years was getting to the point of recognizing that what love does is it's not trying to interfere with what is, but just really focusing on doing my own work and trusting that I will get to offer what I have to offer when it's right.
Right.
Not because my ego feels like it has to or it wants to do something. And so I've been learning about this concept of witnessing and just listening when I had the opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to me all those years through that incredible pain. I don't know how I would have made it through without somebody to witness the depth of that experience. And we didn't always talk. Sometimes it was really, just like once every couple months. Sometimes it was, I was calling you every night. And this whole year has unfolded in a way that has completely shocked and humbled me, which has been delightful because there's been other years of my life where I was diving into the unknown and I knew it, and it just kind of spiraled and got more intense. And truly, at the beginning of the year, I assumed my year would look somewhat like last year. It's looked nothing like last year. Absolutely not. So many things have happened that have absolutely knocked me off my rocker. I just continue to be surprised. It's like life just keeps handing me these gifts, and I, gratefully open them.
Right.
Just new friendships, like love exploding in my life. If someone had told me at the beginning of the year that I was going to have one of the deepest and most challenging mentors I've ever experienced, that I was going to be challenged to write my first book, that I was not only going to finish that first book in less than 6 months, but that I was also going to write a second book, and that I was also going to lead my first women's retreat or retreat, period. And I was also going to celebrate 100,000 downloads for this podcast and go on all these trips to all these places and meet all these exciting people. I feel like I fit 10 years into this year.
Right.
It's been incredible. Yeah. Expansive.
Sounds like all the best things were not things you planned.
They were not. They were beyond my imagination.
Right.
They were beyond the limitations of my mind. And there was a lot of confronting story that came up where I thought, where when good things started, whatever good means, when pleasant things started to happen, things I found pleasant in my experience, there was that little critic who was like, hey, remember how this went last time? You might want to think twice. And it was really loud in the beginning. I think I said to you, and I remember saying this to Dani as I went into different processes this year, sometimes I'm going to need to close up.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I might go quiet and close down and just need to be in my shell.
Right.
And I remember, do you remember what you said to me?
Remind me.
You said, you can close up as many times as you want.
Mm.
I was like, what? No one's ever said that to me. No one's ever given me permission to actually do the process my way. Usually it's like, come on, talk to me. What's wrong with you? You know, why are you shutting down? And I just judge myself for it. I'd be like, why am I always shutting down on people? This is how I push people away. And it's kind of like when I have mornings where I'm grumpy and you're just like, be grumpy. And then I'll ham it up, and I'll furrow my eyebrows while I'm brushing my teeth, and I'll make faces at you, and you just laugh, and you just let me be in whatever my expression is in the moment. And then like a cloud, it passes because I'm giggling by the end of it because my inner child is able to just play the way that she wants to in a constructive way rather than being repressed. So
right.
It's been beautiful because my energy has been able to move. The things that used to get me really stuck and would get bottled up or become resentments, all of that just moves. It's lubricated now. And it feels like this really healthy co-creative cycle with all of the close relationships in my life because I did a lot of boundary work this year and a lot of refining where I was spending my energy and being honest with myself about some of the people pleasing, over promising that I was doing. Cleaning that up was very hard, but it has opened up so much space for creation and love because I'm actually choosing rather than just opening myself to whatever comes in. Kind of always felt like I was putting out fires, just trying to extinguish constant emergencies in my life. Like energy was leaking all over, and there's always someone pissed off or always something uncomfortable. And there is, there's always things to deal with and face and confront. But what's different is the sense of clarity within myself. Like I'm back at the helm of the ship. I know where I'm steering this. I know what my compass is aligned to. Mm-hmm. I know what is in the direction of where I want to go. And I know what's not, what does not belong in this direction. It's not a judgment on the things that don't belong in the direction that I'm desiring to go. They're just not in the direction I'm desiring to go. That's okay. Everyone gets to choose their own direction.
Yeah. This all reminds me of a point earlier in the year where I was struggling with my own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you shared this metaphor of day and night, how much we can love daytime, and then nighttime naturally comes around, and we can spend the whole night wishing it wasn't so, thinking there's something wrong with it. Or we can just recognize that sometimes it's nighttime, know that it will pass.
Right. Because it does, because cycles happen.
Exactly. We can have a preference for daytime. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But having the resistance to nighttime is what actually creates the pain.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then it's like seasons, winter and summer. Yeah. Same thing. It's like, if you love the summer, when winter comes, are you just gonna be forlorn?
Right.
Is your happiness contingent on the season? Or can you learn to love? Can you learn to play in the snow?
Exactly.
To
enjoy
what's here.
Enjoy the frowns with the grumpiness.
Because enjoying what's here is a part of the spectrum. It's a part of the spectrum of the entire human experience. That's what I remind myself of when I'm in an unpleasant experience, particularly. I'm like, oh, thank you for showing me the edges of this spectrum. Wow, this is really growing me. This is really growing me. What strength will I come away with at the end of this? Gosh, I'm delightfully confused. I have no idea where this story is going. My ego is humbled. I look at what's going on in front of me. I watch myself grasping for the solution, and I throw my hands up and I think, I really have no idea how this one ends. I don't know. And it kind of tickles me in a way. So I'm like, life, you got me again. I have no idea. I can't predict it. And I love to predict things. I love to plan. I love to find my meticulous ways of, still controlling a lot of factors.
Yeah.
And sometimes life just surprises you. But it's that learning to become comfortable with being uncomfortable and learning to love the surprise. I wrote about this in the book too. The jelly beans.
Yeah.
So Birdie Bot's every flavor beans, the Harry Potter jelly beans that came out when I was a kid, when all the Harry Potter movies were out. And these jelly beans, the every flavor beans, are an assortment of different flavors. Some of them pleasant, some of them pragmatically unpleasant. And so you have things like cherry and tutti frutti. And then you have things like dirt and booger and vomit, and you don't know what you're going to get. Yeah. You put your hand in and you take one and then you eat it. And that's delightful as a child. It's like, oh, what am I going to get? This might be gross. Might be a booger jelly bean. And so what I wrote about is the pain continues when we make an assessment. So, okay, today's like a booger jelly bean. Like today sucks. And also, yesterday was a booger jelly bean. So likely tomorrow is going to be a booger jelly bean.
Yeah.
And that's the jail that we immediately build around ourselves.
Right.
And the practice for me has been like, oh, today was really challenging. Wow, that kicked my ass.
Yeah.
Not in a bypassy way. Like, I'm not like, but everything was fine and I did a great job. Like, I will genuinely look at myself in the mirror and be like, I don't know what the fuck just happened today.
Yeah.
That was okay. I'm listening. I don't know what I'm learning from this yet, but I am definitely tracking it. I'm definitely aware that there's something afoot. And it's that trust that tomorrow can be a cherry jelly bean or a tutti frutti jelly bean and not as my friend Heath says, extrapolate the data points into the future.
Yeah.
Because that's where the pain story really gets created and rehearsed over and over and over again. And it becomes the pattern. It becomes the pervasive emotional state, and then it becomes chronic. And that's how things spiral.
Yeah.
But it is difficult to find hope when you're in or break the cycle. When you're really in there. It's, at least for me, anything hopeful made me very cynical.
Mm-hmm. Very
cynical. And I was just frustrated with anybody positive. This is not this year. This year I had a lot more tools for what I went through, but in previous years, some of my depressions were so dark. I did not think I was going to be able to claw my way out. And it really felt like a toss-up for me whether I was going to make it or not. And honestly, I didn't really care. It was like, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever. I told my dad when I had that little scare with those, precancerous cells, I was like, if this comes back positive, I'm not going to fight it. He couldn't believe what I was saying, but that's the level of apathy. I was like, well, if this is what the universe wants, then I will. Yeah, I'm not going through all that. I'm not fighting.
Yeah.
He was like, you have everything going for you. What are you saying? And I didn't feel like I had anything going for me. I mean, I saw what people thought I had going for me, but nobody knew my inner life.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knew the darkness I was stroking on a regular basis. And I was just trying to go out and function in the world. Yeah. Harrowing experiences really pierced me. And that is how I know how to love. At the level I am currently seeking to love at, because at the bottom of the bottom, or when there's no bottom and you just keep falling, there's just yourself. And try as I might, I could not run away from myself. And the voices and the demons got louder in my head, doing their worst. And I had nightmares every single night, lucid nightmares. I just thought I was going to have a psychotic break. I couldn't get rest. I was exhausted all the time. Didn't want to do anything or see anyone. And just breathing with that pain on a day-to-day basis, trying to be loving with myself when I ate booger jelly bean after booger jelly bean. It made me very resilient. Yeah. So grateful not to be in that place anymore. But I know that there are people out there who are. And that's part of why I want to be telling my story with you. Is because if just even one person can hear it and relate to it, I did what I came here to do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it really sucks to be in those places, but there really isn't anything wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
That contrast is really, really important for what's to come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you for sitting with me. I really couldn't think of anyone that would be better aligned to sit with me. You've seen me in so many iterations. Seriously, you've known me before the thought room, before all this, before the coaching, before the retreats, before the books. And especially this year, we've spent more time together this year than any other year. And I'm curious what you're witnessing unfold
Mm.
from your perspective.
I still see the same person. And my impression is that you're seeing yourself more clearly, more and more clearly.
I'm seeing myself more clearly.
Yeah, that's really fun to witness.
What does that look like when I see myself? Self?
Mm. So seeing oneself is when we're not trying to be anything, we're just being.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I see you just being more
Mm-hmm.
rather than trying to figure everything out
Right.
or plan for
Planning
everything.
how I would be.
Yeah. And as you were saying earlier, all of these wonderful things are things that were not planned.
Yeah.
Yeah. They come from the magic of just being.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely what happened with the book and
Mhm.
the Zoom call that changed my life.
Tell us about that.
Okay. So growing up, I loved these books, Conversations with God, written by Neil Donald Walsh. And my parents used to listen to them on cassette tape in our minivan in the 90s. And so I was used to these messages, and they really, when I would read the Conversations with God books, I'd feel almost like it was a familiar voice talking to me. Like I could hear myself in the writing. And I think really great books do that. You go, like, at least for me, I go, did I write this? It's like, it feels so in my head.
Yeah.
There's been a couple of books like that. The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer is also one of those books. Anyhow, I was feeling really lost at the end of last year and struggling in the relationship and just kind of feeling like things were growing fast. And I wasn't sure how to keep doing it, keep growing it in a way that wasn't going to get out of control, or one of the plates I was spinning was going to drop. Something bad was going to happen because I wasn't keeping it all reined in. And I wanted to make sure I was in integrity with everything that I was building. And so I was kind of looking around for mentorship. And there was a book on my altar, Conversations with God, book 4, Evolve the Species by Neil Donald Walsh. And I just flipped it open. I thought, I wonder if Neil's still alive. And I flipped to the back and saw his picture and found his website. I Googled him, and it was like, oh, he's 79 years old. He's still alive on his Wikipedia page. And I was like, wow, okay. I went to his website, and there was a group program that had just opened, a group coaching program put on by his guest coaches. But also, as a part of this, I think it was a 3-month program, we would get 3 individual calls with Neil. And so I signed up. This was like November, December. And I think it started in February after I got back from the Joe Dispenza retreat that I went to in January, which was just like a week after my breakup. So I had like a couple of major turning points. I had that deep 7-day meditation retreat by myself in Mexico, which was originally supposed to be with Judd. And then I came back and I started the program with Neil. And I remember my first individual call with him, just kind of really in awe of this man who had written nearly 40 books in his career and sold, 10 or 15, maybe more million copies of his books. I mean, that's unheard of. And he was just so easy to be around, very sweet, direct, wry, just like a rascally sense of humor, which worked so well with me because sometimes I try to get away with shit. I'm like, okay, is this person going to catch me? And he always caught me. And and on our second call, he asked me, so when are you writing your book? And I thought, I don't even remember mentioning to him that I wanted to write a book. I felt so put on the spot. I was racking my brain going, did I even say that I was a writer? Because this has been something I've been thinking about and dreaming about since I was a kid. I always knew. I've always been writing. Every year of my life, I've been writing, journaling, keeping gratitudes, all of it. And so that's when I said, I don't know. I've been working on one for a while. And he said, set a deadline. And so I set a deadline. Or he said, you can write a book in 6 weeks. And I said, how about October 1st? And that felt like a really far away. Like I just picked a random date. That was like the first arbitrary date that came to my mind. It was very intuitive. And he said, great. And then he said, what's the title of your book? And I was like, oh, I don't know. There's like 6 I'm thinking about. And he made fun of me. He was like, oh yeah, that's a great title. There's like 6 I'm thinking about. That'll sell millions of copies. And I loved it. And then he closed his eyes. And then he opened his eyes. And then he spoke a title. And he said, this is the title of your book. And at the time, I didn't even really know if I liked the title, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, why is he giving me this title? This is like such a surreal experience. And Neil Donald Walsh just closed his eyes and then just blurred out a title for my first book. He doesn't even know what I write about. Like, what is this? But I wrote it down. And the very next day I started writing. I got up, I wrote the title page with the title he had given me. And I had no idea when I started what I was going to write about. I had no idea. I just knew that I was going to get up every day at the same time and I was going to show up for this window of time and sit down. And that was my agreement. So there was no outline. There was no direction, which is against what everybody else will tell you to do. And this was my process. And it was the most intuitive thing I've ever done. I now, having completed the book, very much understand why that title was given to me. Because the title, almost on a subconscious level, acted as a roadmap for my own self-exploration.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was led through a psychological journey in my own healing because of that title. It was like a lighthouse that I could constellate to and really started to go into my own deep process of self-inquiry. And it was sort of just like my inner thoughts of what kind of things were coming up in my life, processing the breakup, processing old stories and betrayal wounding, just blockages and closures around intimacy and friendship, fears around all of that. And I would just ask myself questions and I would ponder them. And that's really how it started. I'd go for a lot of walks in the woods and just listen. And sometimes I'd bring my phone, and sometimes I'd just sit down on a rock and start typing madly. Like this was like I would stop in the middle of the path, and I'd talk to you on the phone sometimes. I'd talk to Dani. I'd talk to my mom. I'd have a great conversation, and it would spark something in me. I go, I wonder why that is the way that is. Do you remember some of these conversations?
I do.
And I'd call you and we'd unpack the nuance of the situations that were occurring in our lives and the human behavior behind it and what we believe people were really seeking in the interaction that wasn't being spoken about. And at its core, I believe we're all seeking love in some way, shape, or form. And so it was about unveiling all of these distortions that get in the way of our intimacy with one another, of our connectedness, of our belonging to one another. And wow, what a journey that led me through. And you know how that journey ends, which is it was the week before the book was due was crazy. I had so much writing. I thought I did not see that it would be that hard in the final push because this material was just pouring out of me. And you remember what happened is you came to me 2 days before 48 hours before my book deadline. And you were like, "Hey, Hal, so this is a lot of writing. And it's taking us about this much to get through this many 1,000 words. And I think maybe we could consider that this might be 2 books." And I remember looking at you in the eyes, just trying not to twitch in my whole body as I thought, I just kind of felt like the world was crashing down around me because I had this one plan for what it was going to be. I mean, we had all those sections in neat little file folders, and there was just so much material. And so you kind of said, maybe this is 2 books. And I was like, that was a moment of deep surrender for me. Deep surrender.
Yeah.
Because if you have over, I think it was like 130,000 words I had, and I was trying to get it down to 65,000 or something. I was like, this is my blood, sweat, and tears. And how can I possibly decide what belongs here with this much time left? So the metaphor that came to mind in all this was, it was as if I had planned a really neat home birth delivery for my child. And someone was like, "Oh, by the way, you're having twins. And so we're going to give you a C-section." And it was like, what? How do I reorient myself on this task? And you and I, we worked around the clock on that. We sometimes didn't sleep. I was so sick that week. I was just vomiting. Like I couldn't keep any food down. I was like bone broth and juice, just trying to, I'd throw up. I'd have diarrhea. I'd go type the manuscript more. And it was deeply focused. I don't know if I've had a period of that much deep focus, maybe ever.
Yeah.
I felt like we were in altered states.
Yeah.
Time was moving very strangely. And it really came down to the wire. I sent off the manuscript to Neil at 11:55 p.m., 5 minutes before it was due. which was not my plan or my style.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember I was in quite a state. I was kind of not sure that it would actually get sent in time. And that had never occurred to me. So again, it was kind of like watching just like a slow crash. And I was like, no, that's not the way this ends. But I could see it. Like I could almost see the multiple trajectories in front of me. And there wasn't much time to really discern or know what to do. I just had to keep moving. So was the manuscript perfect the way that I wanted it when I sent it at 11:55? No, absolutely not. And I was really confronted with myself in that moment. I remember looking at the draft of the email I typed out to Neil, had the document attached, and I felt so sick. I was like, I don't want to send it to him like this. This is not how I wanted it. All my control was coming up, and voices were saying, well, you don't have to send it. You can just tell him something came up. I was like, but I said I would do this. This is my word.
Yeah.
And that was the moment. I thought, okay, I cannot send this, make up an excuse, save face, or send him something that I know I tried my best on, but I know is not my best work.
Right.
And be open to whatever the feedback is. And so what do you think I chose?
You kept your word.
I kept my word because I, at the end of the day, have to go to sleep with me. That's the voice that I met deep in the darkness. And if I don't have my integrity, if I don't have my trust with myself, how on earth am I ever going to trust anybody in this world? How am I going to feel safe if I'm not being what I expect back? I'm not going to be able to create and resonate at that level. It will not be offered to me. So I get to offer the vibration of whatever I want to see in order to have that reflected back to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I sent it. and then 4 days later, flew to Sedona to lead my first retreat with Miss Dani Rain, my beloved, dear friend. And that was really magical. Really, really magical. I don't even know where to begin with the experience that was. I was absolutely changed by it. I've never received so much loving, joyous reflection from a group of people I've encountered as I did in that container. Every single one of those women showed up with their hearts open, ready to learn, ready to work, ready to play, ready to connect. And they really showed themselves to Dani and I and to each other. And the level of connection that we were able to co-create in just 4 days was nothing short of ineffable. It was like lifetime connection sort of stuff.
Right.
And a lot of these women had shared that they, like me, had gone through a period of deep aloneness, of really turning into their own inner work and wanting to be met by others like them. Where were they?
Yeah.
And that was the feeling that was uniting a lot of the women who chose to come on this retreat. That was how I felt before I met Dani. It's like, who's going to meet me? And I really felt like I had been meeting me for a while. I really felt like I had been turning into my own inner work. I was like, oh, when is it going to not be work? When is there going to be play? And it's hard when you're all on your own to really feel that connection with the world, with living, with joy, with why we're here.
Yeah.
I believe we're meant to do this together. If we were supposed to live in isolation and do this alone, we would have incarnated, we would have been born onto a planet where it was just one being. But that's not how this universe is designed. That's not how whatever is divine or God or even random evolution, if that's what you believe, that's not the reality of how this is designed. We grow through the reflections of the others that we encounter. In those contrasts, in those polarities, we orient ourselves, we make sense of ourselves based on how we're interfacing and reflecting other beings. So the retreat was just the processes these women went through and shared. Beautiful, honest, hard, hilarious, awkward, creative. What a beautifully rich, exciting, colorful group of women. So multi-talented and fun and silly. And I believe we brought that out of one another. Mm. It was so real. It was so real. And as I walked around the retreat in this beautiful house, in Sedona, surrounded by the red rocks, no one around us, this big, beautiful infinity pool. And as I walked around, it was so surreal. Again, I did the peak moment thing. I was checking in with my body, and my body was feeling so much energy and joy and, dare I say, ecstasy. That feeling of electrical surge of warmth flowing through your heart and your body when you're almost wired by life. It's like the feeling of falling in love. You meet somebody new and then you're staying up late until like 4 a.m. talking to them or whatever. And you have all the energy in the world for that. It's like the week before you were just like totally flat out and uninspired and depressed. And then you meet someone and there's a spark and it's like, wow, I'm alive again. That feeling of aliveness comes from not the other person, but within us. Right. And yeah, we fall in love with ourselves the way that we are when we're in love. Because when we're in love, the love, when we're in love, we're our version of ourselves that we're like the most turned on by. It's just because we've given ourselves permission to be that. But it's easy to project that onto another person, say they're the reason because it wasn't happening before they came in. But what's missing is all that it took to be able to love that way, at whatever level you're loving. Like that's something that you, I, whomever is listening has surrendered into, has agreed to. Like, I agree. I allow for myself to be shown this deeply, this vulnerably, these parts that I don't show everybody else. Because that's like when we're in love and we can share those weird, strange, eccentric, sometimes just gnarly parts of ourselves and have them accepted. It's an expression of our own self-love. And to see that in action, to watch it unfold, to watch it grow between a group of strangers, to have been part of co-creating that and be alive and awake in those moments. I say awake in the soup. So just looking out from the seat of my consciousness, going, this is a magnificent moment. This is a magnificent moment. And this one, and this one, and this one, with each breath. That's what that experience was like.
Wow.
So we're going to do more. So these are some of the things that happened this year. The book, the retreat, the healing, the podcast, growth, the party, birthday party. It was so fun and wild. And so many trips, so many experiences. You know, you and I went to California, writing by the ocean, overlooking the ocean every day, biking down beach streets, watching the sunsets.
Yeah.
I thought, wow. There was really a time in my life when I believed none of this was available to me. I would have been good if I just had enough money to eat.
Yeah.
And if I didn't want to die every day. So I never thought it could be this good for me. I saw other people doing it. And that I was probably on some subconscious level jealous of and probably cynical of, and therefore blaming them or saying I didn't want it because I couldn't even admit. To admit it would just, I thought, bring me into more pain of how I didn't have it. So this year has been a practice, like I said, of receiving goodness and in training myself to be like, yeah, this is real. It can be this good. Doesn't mean it always will. And I'm okay with that too. But while I am in the experience of the deliciousness, why would I ever spend my thoughts in the fear that it's not always going to be this way? Because nothing is always that way. That's a fear that things need to stay exactly the way that they are is really a deep subconscious fear of dying. It's like, no, I can't, things can't change. I don't want to go there. You know, I don't want to go there. And not to say that we need to be morbidly aware of our impermanence all the time, like every day ruminating, I'm going to die someday. That's not what I mean. But being aware that everything changes and that everything's impermanent makes everything I'm experiencing a fucking miracle.
Yeah.
A miracle. And therefore, the person sitting in front of me is the most important person in that moment. That's all there is. They are. I mean, where else would I be but here with you? This is it.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at, Kyle. Thanks for asking. Thanks for having me on the thought room.
It's been delightful. It's been an honor. We hope to have you back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.